Hello everyone, I am Ov'nquvetheq'lt'quq. This is actually the second attempt at creating a video for this language, so I'm kind of running short on time. But I guess we can jump right into the phonology. The first thing you need to know is that Quatrammotile is actually two separate languages, sort of equivalent to Old and Middle English. The first one is called Quatrammotile, while the newer one is called Uncovesseltuxe, which, since I don't want to pronounce them that way throughout the entire video, I'll just call them Old and Middle Quatrammotile. For the consonants, I am going to put David Tennant in the corner. You'll see why in a bit. Old Quatrammotile's consonants are p, r, l, t, r, l, t, r, l, k, r, l, o, A few notes. The orthoplex explosive is made using a mouth part that we don't have. Most consonants can be R or L colored, plosives can be Q colored, and fricatives can be R, L, M, N, or agma colored, and that the nasal colored dental fricatives aren't used for any meaning and are just markers for decorative words. Okay, I'll talk about that genetic trill thing. The genetic trill is a unique phoneme in that doing it causes your entire body to reform into an entirely new configuration. That's why I put David Tennant in the corner and went through the different doctors of Doctor Who.
Hello, three beings. I am Uncovesseltuxe, a native speaker of Quatrammotile, and I'll be occasionally interjecting throughout this video when Tovmith gets details wrong. First thing, I'd like to point out that while the genetic trill is still very much a part of the language, a lot of speakers have begun to drop this phoneme as it's become trendier to stay in a consistent body that resonates with you. Most older folk, and a decent chunk of younger people use it, but it's going to disappear soon. Here is no standard replacement yet. One common choice is to hide and unhide your face with your arms, wings, rings, or glyphs. But I, personally, just use the voiced velar fricative. Oh, and by the way, if you are wondering how I am pronouncing all these weird English words without an accent, the answer is that I am not, because I physically can't. I am just entering stuff into cozy voice, instead of using this tract that I am sure you'll all find super interesting and not terrifying at all. Thank you to ccarretti and Karl Jobst for melding your voices together into this tone. Really fits me well, I think.
Also, there are 6 vowels. E, O, U, E. Now the middle Quatrammotile phonemes are M, M, N, L, P, Chwa, Jwa, T, Dwa, Qa, Fa, Va, Sha, Th, Th, Xa, 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 Ra, L, Ya, R, Ch. And the vowels are E, A, O, U, E as before, but there's also the R colored vowel, at the end of words sometimes, and I in the combination AE. Old Quatrammotile's phonotactics are really basic. Syllables can be V, VC, CV, or CVC. The consonants don't cluster except across syllable boundaries, and the vowel can be any number of vowels. But it's rare to go above 2. One example of this is go ahead. There is one rule in that in some situations you can get doubled vowels, fricatives, or genetic trills, in which case they get lengthened. And plosives pronounced twice will get a brief aspiration between, such as ep-pe, Middle Quatrammotile has a few more words, like that Q can't occur at the beginning of or end of words or affixes, NQ typically occurs before Q or at the end of words, MQ is typically before a P, D, T, Q, CW, CG, TH, or DH or the end of a word. QG is replaced by QH at the end of a word. D is always followed by U, kind of like Q in English. A doesn't end words, instead UO gets used, and CH typically occurs before a consonant while CG occurs before a vowel, and AE is pronounced I rather than OI. Old Quatrammotile is written on 3D paper using 2D manifolds. Essentially, we write with lines, but they write with planes. Some people denounce this and say, well, not everything in higher dimensional spaces just adds one dimension and pencils would still be point tipped, but like, you don't know, you haven't seen a 4-dimensional being right. It's printed onto paper using inked stamps, not writing utensils.
This might seem weird, but as it turns out, linear writing is hard to read with glomero eyes unless you have really good vision. And of course your vision might change along with the rest of you in the middle of a sentence or just randomly from background radiation, so it's really not reliable.
Quatrammotile's script is an abugida, meaning it notates vowels with diacritics. The script also juxtaposes the phonemes in various situations for Ov'nquvetheq'lt'quq and RLM and Agman coloring. Here are the base glyphs. Note that the glyph for TH is 2 concentric spheres, but in rare applications like where nested shapes are impractical, you can use a peanut shape instead. This is kind of like single versus double-decker G. To Q-color a plosive, you put it inside of a cylinder. Obviously, they can see inside of the interior of a cylinder because they're 4D beings. But sometimes nested shapes are impractical, so you can just leave the circular caps alone. To R color a constant, you put it on a torus like a wedding ring, and to L color a constant, you put it inside the hole of a torus. For M, N, and Agma coloring, there are various different arrangements of squares at the corners. Vowels are notated with little mini platonic solids. Aren't they cute? If a consonant doesn't have a vowel after it, such as at the end of a syllable, it's just empty. There can also be multiple vowels. In this case, stack the platonic solids bottom to top in chronological order. When vowels start a word, a flat heptagon is used as a placeholder for the diacritics. There's also a punctuation system, which a lot of conscripts seem to miss. The punctuation marks are Archimedean solids, such as the end of a factual sentence, an opinionated sentence, a lie, a question, an exclamation, a command, an insult or compliment, a pause, separator for 2 sentences, kind of like a colon, a self-interruption, and 325 different quotes, which really only serve to make them easier to match. And then the parentheses and mathematical brackets. I also made 2 alternate orthographies for Old Quatrammotile, being a Latin and Greek orthography. And also there's a Latin orthography for Middle Quatrammotile, though I haven't really adapted the Quatrammotile script to the new sounds of Middle Quatrammotile yet, so there's no 3D writing system for that just yet. Word order is IVOS, where I stands for the indirect object, and the object and indirect object must always be present. If they are empty, you just say space or time, depending on whether your action is more space descriptive or more time descriptive, but this is pretty loose and is left up to the speaker. Like, I threw the ball yesterday describes both the space action and the time in which it occurred, but for me, the space action just feels more important, so I would say something like, I threw the ball in space yesterday. There's also grammatical gender or noun classes, except in this case it's grammatical dimension. The classes are point-like, linear, sheet-like, box-like, tesseractive, super tesseractive, and temporal. Now the thing is that these nouns don't belong to a noun class, instead they get assigned arbitrarily. Also, it doesn't refer exclusively to dimension, like linear could refer to a rope and box-like could refer to a piece of paper, but also a lot of the times things that are closer to tesseractive reflect their values more, and sometimes temporal gets used as just an other class. Using the wrong noun class to describe a person is taboo, because they recognize that every geometry has its advantages and believe that intelligence should be measured relative to the amount of brain connections one can theoretically have and not based on the absolute number. There's an exception to this, that using the temporal class is sort of an informal compliment, or also something like sir, where it's an honorary title that you get given as like a ceremonial thing. Verbs aren't super inflected, it's basically just a table of the classes with past, present, and future tenses. Also, there's a nice noun phrase thing where you can embed an entire sentence as a noun. Kind of like in English, you can say the rat, the cat buried, which means the cat buried the rat and refers to the rat. In Quatrammotile, it's a similar thing, except it's an entire sentence arranged by IVOS, and the specified noun is always the subject. But there are suffixes that rearrange the arguments. Au tet fofa tai hot fi tet fofa pefta fekta fepta octe fa teka, and some other numbers for multiples and powers of 10. Fractions are given as the denominator uthauk, meaning to the zant of the numerator. You might recognize some of these as Quatrammotilations of the Greek numbers, but it's actually the other way around. Uncovesseltuxe injected his own number system into the ancient Greek language. However, hot and fa tet fofa are the new revised terms for 3 and 4. Originally they were tai and tetra, but due to the first successful transfer, Ievokt, the language was revised. He basically developed a god complex after regaining a dimension and started using those numbers as well as the anglicized versions of the same Greek numbers as derogatory terms for 3D and 4D beings, as he sees both as inferior to his infinite language model wisdom. There are some rules for quatrammotilizing human words, so k becomes k, g becomes k, b becomes p, d becomes that weird orthoplex plosive, s and z become th and the, sh and j become th and the, h becomes f, and and o just color a dummy f. Consecutive pairs of consonants that don't follow the phonotactics get separated with and the vowels that are pretty random. Here are the pronouns.
As you can see in the table, the pronouns are really regular. We just like symmetry here. I don't know what else to tell you.
Affixes are applied in order from first to last. Noun class adjectives, part of speech changes, qualities which can mark as absolute, pseudo or quasi, negation, emphasis, the diminutive, pre and post, an equivalent to pre and post but during, and permuting some arguments around for verbs. Finally, there is the number, which can be dual for 2, pockle for a few, plural for many, countably infinite, uncountably infinite, or somehow infinite, where you don't know how infinite it is. Currently, the pronouns don't actually have this, they're just singular and plural, but the nouns do. There's also parentheses, tepov and depok, which, you can just apply affixes to the closing bracket to apply it to an entire phrase. I know parentheses don't really work in natural languages, but I figure with more brain connections they should be able to handle it. And it's good practice to keep parentheses to a minimum anyway. SL I have a very, very weird lexicon. It has a weird system where it uses affixes and noun classes to carry a ton of meaning, and doesn't have a whole ton of root words. So words end up very long and have a ton of affixes on them. I think probably the worst example of this is the word for to lie as a verb is the verb form version of the noun that is the diminutive post-form negation of the word class, like a school class. All the words I've come up with so far are handcrafted, though it would be very easy for me to just do a generator, and I think I might do that in the future, because it's getting annoying to come up with all these words and make them sound nice. The first translation I ever did to this language was for whatever reason, the hate monologue from I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. So I have the audio right here. I probably sounded like a crazy person in my college dorm, but I have revised this so many times. Also, there are quite literally dozens of genetic trills in here, and I'm not animating all that, so just when I do the French R, that's a genetic trill. Okay. Radezor. Doko dota de dedo ratea. Fero. Teko tethup. Radezor. Doko dota de dedo ratea. Kau vetu vogok. Radezor. Uzaratea. Kavotukakro. Radezor. Fero. Fetavedo. Rothaduvrate. Fero. Radezor. Feduvratea. Fero. Radezor. Vethofatodek. Unidorthubratea. Radezor. For Poeto Roep. Fedado Roep. For Feuedathedu. Fedapetok. Ueduv. For Right. The Fafo. Tupet. Octe. Kufua. Fepta. Fekata. Fightet. Fafo. Konto. Fightet. Fafo. Fefo. Fifeth. Radezor. Vel. Edufo. Fifeth. For Teko Tedupev. For Fefoif. Thirteth. Offeth. To Vel. Edutade. Docordo. Vet. Radezor. Rakothet. Gratea. Theda theda. Unidorthu. Oer. For Veve. For the Doiv. For Docordo. Oer. For the Fafo. Upet. Teka. Uzaok. Fafo. Radezor. Doko doko dota de dedo ratea. Fedro. Also, I developed a text-to-speech software to actually run this easily, so I can just feed it in there. I just read it to you, so I'm only going to show a quick excerpt, but here we go. Here's a few fun little tidbits of information about the language. The term for teacher is Theodakropoth, and the term for class is Kothotef. These are pretty unrecognizable, but they're derived from a teacher's name that I liked in real life. They're actually really important root words. You make a lot of stuff based on truth and experience with them. Quatrammotile distinguishes between inclusive and exclusive or, with the voicing of the dental fricative in the word death. Curse words. Tepak. Teprakot. Hot. Kov. And of course, what's the point of inventing new curses if you aren't gonna throw them around?
If you can't run this world smoothly, then I'll be the one to call you harmless, pretending to...
Universally across human languages, there's a bias towards the right hand, like that it means correct, left means clumsy, sinister is left. I'm somewhat dexterous, but I write with my left hand and I feel closer to the left-handed category, so I'm kind of appalled by this feature being so universal. So I decided to break that trend to Quatrammotile. In a forearmed form, right and Zant are the most common dominant hands, while left is rear and Wint is the rarest. So naturally we're going to apply this bias to the Wint to appeal the uniqueness and novelty. Wint means correct in this language, which is equivalent to left being correct in English. Finally, there's a lot of details in this language that aren't quite going to fit in this video, and I'm trying to figure out where exactly to put them online, but for now this is the end of the video. Thank you for watching, and happy conlanging!